Hi everybody, we're up here at Horseshoe Mound this morning for our Facebook Live video. We're not actually able to do it live today, so you're watching a pre-recorded video right now. So up here at Horseshoe Mound today, we have our Executive Director of JDCF, Steve Barg, with us. And Steve's going to tell us a little bit about JDCF in general, how the organization works. And if you guys have questions, you can always type them in the comments section and we can come around later on and answer your questions. So my first question for Steve is, how are land acquisitions chosen? How is Horseshoe Mound chosen a lot of the other land acquisitions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have, I guess just to start off with, is it's a very planned process. It's not random. We have land acquisition criteria that was developed by our board and by our Land Preservation Committee. And that land acquisition criteria looks at two plans, one statewide plan and one local plan. The statewide plan is the Illinois Wildlife Action Plan, and it identifies areas throughout the state, and for us in particular in Northwest Illinois, that are of particular interest in terms of protecting wildlife habitat. The other plan we look at is the Joe Davis County Comprehensive Plan from 2009, and that has a trails and greenways portion of the plan that identifies scenic views and also areas that should be looked at to protect for nature preserves and parks and recreational enjoyment. So we rely heavily on both of those two plans. When a property is for sale that's of interest and meets that criteria, we bring that back to the committee and then to our board, and it goes through a series of approvals that usually take about a year from start to finish. We only acquire land that is for sale by the owner, and sometimes we have land that someone would like to donate. It has to go through the same criteria even if it's a donation. And we've actually said no to donations before, and our board and committee have said no to acquisition projects before. So it's not a slam dunk. Yeah.
And so for this process, can you tell us about how these acquisitions are funded? How is the organization funded?
Yeah, so specifically, so our organization obviously is funded by you. It's funded by individuals and businesses and foundations that are interested in the work that we do. But acquisitions specifically are funded primarily by two private foundations, statewide foundations that fund work like ours throughout the state of Illinois, and that's the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation and the Grand Victoria Foundation. Those are our two primary sources of funding for acquisitions.
And just to be clear, you don't receive any tax dollars.
Yes, yeah, so very, very important. We are a private land conservation organization, nonprofit, so we don't receive tax dollars for acquisitions or any other work that we do for that matter. And in that regard, we're kind of weird and different in a good way. And that is that we've purchased these properties through private funding and then decided to open them up to the public, largely because our members support that work and continue to support that work ongoing. So these are private lands that we choose to open to the public. They are not publicly owned lands, and that's an important distinction. We do have other funders who I do want to mention: the Conservation Fund, a national organization. Doris Duke Foundation has been part of our funding. Natural Land Institute has been part of our funding, and all of our members have supported work, in particular here at Horseshoe Mound, to open this up to the public. So that's how we fund our land acquisition.
And so
projects.
After you get the funding secured, you do a lot of restoration of the ecosystems on those lands. So can you tell us a little bit about how the restoration decisions are made? How do you decide what to do where?
Yeah. So back to our mission on this, we preserve land for the lasting well-being of people and wildlife. So we're interested in serving both of those audiences, both of those constituencies. So we look at the land and we think about how can we restore the habitat here for maximum biodiversity to support the most wildlife we can, and often that's returning it to its natural state. So we use historic maps, historic documents, we look at soils, we consult with experts, and that gives us information into, are we restoring this to prairie, or oak savanna, or oak woods, or hill prairie, or wetland. All of those things come into play. And then with that, we're looking at how can we develop this for human use? How can we make this an enjoyable experience and a nature preserve that people would also enjoy, to see some of this wildlife and to be in nature.
So who does a lot of this restoration work and,
Yeah.
and maintains those nature preserves? Who does the work?
So there we have to thank many volunteers. We have a huge volunteer contingency. In fact, we have people working, our Gale crew, Galena Area Land Enthusiasts, all volunteers working just down on the other point here at Horseshoe Mound, part of the addition. And they're out here every Tuesday and Thursday. That's somewhere around 15 people, guys and gals, come out and do a lot of the restoration work. We also have friends groups, Friends of Wapello, Friends of Horseshoe Mound, Friends of Valley of Eden, and that's another group of volunteers that helps. We have Walmart people that come out and help with their volunteer hours that they give back to the community, and other corporate groups. Rotary has been out here doing restoration work. So it's very community oriented, but we do have a professional staff, actually quite a few. We have 4 staff members in our restoration and public access work. It's the most expensive part of our annual budget is to maintain these places. And again, we're not getting any public tax dollars to do that. This is all coming from people like you. So it's a really important part of our work. And with 2,000 acres and 10 preserves to maintain, we're acting like a modest-sized forest preserve district or conservation district, but don't receive those tax dollars. Yeah.
And I know a lot of these nature preserves are visited by people all over the county and beyond.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks are probably wondering if these preserves are open for larger events, larger private events like weddings or family reunions. Is that something that is allowed on these nature preserves?
I wish I could say yes, but the answer to that is no, and here is why. The lands we purchase are under certain type of zoning, which is in the agricultural zoning, which permits nature preserves, but does not allow us, without a special use permit, to open these up to large private gatherings like weddings and reunions and corporate events. So no, unfortunately we can't do that without a special use permit. And to receive a special use permit, we've gone through that process with the county zoning and planning, would require us to put in full bathrooms, get water to these places, get electric to these places, and that's just prohibitively expensive to us. So we still get thousands of people that visit these preserves every year, but we can't accommodate those private events.
And one question that I've heard from some of the community members is JDCF taking land out of agriculture production?
Yeah. So, and I think this has been a misconception in a lot of ways, and so I'd love to be able to speak directly to this issue. So the answer to that is sometimes yes, and sometimes no, in terms of taking land out of agricultural production. Oftentimes our grants, we can only receive these grants with the condition that they are that the land is returned to its native habitat, prairie, woodland, forest, wetland. And so we're compelled by taking that land taking that money to be able to purchase that land to restore it. Other times, as an example here at Horseshoe Mound, we rent out the cropland and hayland that's down below to Marlo Schultz, one of the farmers in the Galena
So it stays
areas.
in row crop.
And it stays in production, and it will for the next 25 years at least. At Valley of Eden is another example where we have natural grassland and oak savanna right next to cow pasture, cattle pasture. And Steve Eden is our farmer there, and we lease the land to him, about 100 acres of pasture land. And we love that. When we can do that, we do that. So we are totally supportive of the agricultural community and the family farming that goes on in this community. And when we can, we honor that. When we can't, because of funding requirements, we return it to habitat. There's one more thing on this. native tallgrass prairie in the state of Illinois, only 1/100th of 1% of that native habitat, 25 million acres in the state of Illinois pre-settlement, is left. I'm going to say that again. 1/100th of 1% is left. So returning some of this agricultural land, formerly agricultural land, which formerly, before that, was native tallgrass prairie often, is, we think, a good thing. We're not taking that much land out of production, and we're returning very rare native habitat back to wildlife
Which
and
we
to
all
people.
depend on.
Yeah. So we are pro-farmer, no question about it, but we're also pro-habitat.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to make tough decisions. Yeah.
And so just a reminder, if you guys are watching this video, if you have questions for Steve throughout, type them in the comments section. I have one last question for Steve. For the people watching this, what do you want them to take away?
That this land is open to them, to the public, at the privilege and behest of our members and our board. We don't have to open this land to the public unless our granting agencies, which sometimes do, require that the land be open to the public. But as a private entity, we think it's important to share these preserves with people, to act like a county conservation district or forest preserve district, because we don't have one of those tax-supported types of entities in our county. And we love that these places are open to people and wildlife and are sustaining healthy lands for people and wildlife. So I want to thank our volunteers and our members for allowing us this privilege to open these places to the public. And we just ask that people follow things like leash your dogs, pick up after your dogs, treat these places as you would your own home, because they're the communities. They don't belong to the public in that way, but because of how our board and members have felt about this, they've generously opened these places, and our funders, we've generously opened these places to the public. So we just ask people, obviously, to respect these places and help us care for them, and if you can, become a member, because that's how these places are going to be open in the future. So thanks to our members and our volunteers. Big thanks.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was really good information. And remember, if you guys have more questions for Steve, feel free to type them in. So next week, next Thursday, we are actually going to move our Facebook Live session from Thursday to Saturday. So we're not going to do it on Thursday. We're going to do it on Saturday. And we're going to be down at the Wapello Land and Water Reserve just south of Hanover, Illinois. And on that Saturday, we will be hearing from our special guest, Phil Millhouse, who is the Midwest Director of the Archaeological Conservancy. He's going to be there to share the story of what we have learned about Wapello and the long-range plan for a Wapello Discovery Center. We are also going to recognize him as the award recipient of the Nancy Hamill Winter Award. So tune in next Saturday to view that Facebook Live event. I'm really looking forward to it as we bring in our fundraiser next week. So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you Saturday.